and did someone say yeah? No, never mind. The first week we talked about loneliness in society. The second week we talked about loneliness in family. And this time, it's the most introspective, most spiritual, most emotional, I would argue. It's about loneliness in yourself. The way that this normally works is we do a lecture component before Maghrib, but we're going to break for Maghrib around 8 o'clock, inshallah, and then we'll come back and we'll do discussion circles. If you do not already have one, please make sure that you grab a name tag, because that's going to be very critical to getting you into the proper groups. Each one has a number on it. That'll tell you what group you're supposed to be in. Also today, we have some food, so please grab, there's like some brownies, some baked goods, and there's also some fruit over there, so you're more than welcome to grab one of those while you sit down. And thank you to whoever brought those in, you anonymous hero, alhamdulillah. So without any further ado, Imam Abdul Malik Merchant.
الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي وصلى الله عليه وسلم محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم أجمعين. So the first week, as Umar mentioned, we spoke about loneliness on a societal level and how we have sort of gone from a sort of pre-modern traditional society where we lived human scale and close to everyone to an age of atomization and fracturing of our communities, which led to individualization and a lot of other things. The second week we talked about how that impacted families. And from breaking down families, it then hurts us as individuals. The goal for this week, inshallah, is to talk about how loneliness is affecting us as individuals. Now, the first 2 weeks were admittedly a bit more academic, one that is my sweet spot. But also, I believe that we have to set a framework. We have to set a precedent so that when we do talk about it, how it's affecting each and every one of us as individuals, that we actually have someplace to start and we know where we're going to be at. For today, inshallah, we're going to focus on this loneliness versus solitude, recognizing in others solutions, and being alone with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, the parable of a believer in their affection, mercy, and compassion for each other is that of one body. When each of them aches, the whole body reacts with sleepnesses and fever. There's a typo here, it's going to drive me crazy, so I'm not going to SubhanAllah, when the Prophet ﷺ says this, he frames the individual actions of us in the context of a collective. When the Prophet ﷺ talks about us individually, he's talking about us in our affection, mercy, and compassion for each other. And I was talking to Imam Majid earlier this week, and he highlighted how most of Islamic spirituality happens in relationship with other people, if not just relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So what that means is that our ability to connect with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, our ability to feel, whether it be some sort of just a lack of loneliness, some sort of affection, some sort of companionship, requires that we are in conversation with and around other people. But that also translates into how it is that we connect with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So my ability to be mindful of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, my ability to be hopeful in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, my ability to be in fear or awe of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, isn't happening in a silo. It's not me just saying, Ya Allah, Ya Allah, Ya Allah, and trying to push through whatever's going on. It happens in relation to what's happening in the world around me. It happens in relation to how my family's treating me, how society at large is going through different things. And so when the Prophet ﷺ is talking about this, whereas a whole body, when one part hurts, the other part hurts. And so as we're thinking about us as individuals, let's not forget the fact that we are part of a larger ummah, a larger nation, a larger collective of people, wherein even if we don't feel that, someone in this room with us today feels lonely. And perhaps loneliness isn't something that is overtaking us. It's not something that we feel like we are drowning in the feeling of it. But it is something that we may recognize some of the symptoms, some of the feelings in our inside of us. So to start, we have to separate, as it was beautifully mentioned at the end, I believe, of last class, our brother Akbar, he's not here right now. Can we differentiate between loneliness and solitude? Because there is a difference. And we think about that, this is not Ghar Hira, but this is a cave. A cave is in which the message of Islam started in, of the Prophet ﷺ. And the Prophet ﷺ in that time was alone in his worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And because of that chose to go into solitude, to be alone in a cave. He chose to remove himself from society at large, to remove himself from his family, so that he could worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as best as he could by himself. Well, we have the Prophet ﷺ in a cave later on in life as well. When it's the Prophet ﷺ and Abu Bakr fleeing from Quraysh, making the hijrah. They're running away for their lives. And in neither time we find the Prophet ﷺ feeling lonely, at least in a spiritual sense. In an individual sense, the first time when he's in Ghar Hira about to receive revelation, he's lonely on a societal level. No one seems to understand how it is that he connects with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. No one understands what he's doing. They think of him as someone who's strange. But the second time he's in the cave, it's Abu Bakr al-Ani who feels scared and lonely because of how it is he's feeling. And he asked the Prophet ﷺ, well, what happens if they just look down? All they have to do is look down, they'll be able to see us. And how does the Prophet ﷺ respond to him? What is two people when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the third? They're not alone. The Prophet ﷺ, even when they were physically alone, couched this conversation in a ma'iyah with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in an association with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So then how do we define these two things? Solitude, the definition is state or situation of physically being alone. No one's around us, it's just us. But loneliness is the sadness because one has no friends or company. Solitude is just being by ourselves, whereas loneliness is the feeling of sadness that comes because we have no friends or no company. So then we have to ask ourselves, can I feel solitude without being lonely? And can I be lonely without being in solitude? Can I be by myself and not feel sad about that? The Prophet ﷺ was an example of that. And can I be with everyone, all my friends, a bunch of people, and feel an incredible sense of sadness and isolation despite what's going on? I believe we can. That if there was to be a Venn diagram, I believe that we can feel solitude and feel lonely. So being by ourselves and feel lonely. I believe that we can feel lonely while in solitude, but we can also feel lonely while being around people, and we can be in solitude without feeling lonely. It's all very possible. And so I want us to think of it larger than physical proximity. I want us to think a little bit more generously, a bit more further outside the box than just solitude or loneliness with regard to relationship with people, and then try to recenter it onto how it is that we feel when we're, that feeling of sadness or that feeling of isolation that comes by itself. You know, subhanAllah, before Ramadan, I wanted to start a podcast. And the podcast the intention of it was to explore emotions through lived experience. And the first episode, ironically, was about loneliness. And we were supposed to have 3 different people speaking. One person, a brother, who chose to live in isolation. He bought a tiny house in the middle of nowhere. He's got a sheep. He's got 40, I don't know how many acres, and he's just happy. Another brother works as an imam. The sisters wouldn't agree, so I wasn't getting charged. I asked them, and they said no, we don't want to do it. The other brother didn't know that he was in isolation. He's a teacher, he serves in the community, he's got his own initiative, he's got a family, he's got all these things. But I went through the interview asking him all these questions, and he was like, wow, I guess you're right, I am alone. The person who we didn't get to record in all of this was me. No one would ever assume I have a big family, alhamdulillah, I serve as imam. But oftentimes, I feel very isolated. I feel a lot of solitude in my life. It's not because I necessarily don't have people around me. I would argue that I have a lot of people around me most of the time. In fact, when I don't, this is gonna drive me crazy on this. When I don't have people around me, it's actually pretty awkward. I'm an extrovert, I'm so used to having people around me. But as we'll get to in the solutions portion of this later on, because of how narrow my focus, the things that I'm interested in often are, I can feel like I'm the only one who cares about these things. I can feel like no one else understands where I'm coming from in my concerns, because these are unique in the perspective that I have, whether it be in the community or in family or anything like that. And so when we think about this, you can be surprised that someone who works in a masjid, Jum'ah, will have thousands of people listening, etc., can still feel very, very lonely. But before we start thinking about with regard to ourselves, oftentimes it's easy for us to recognize emotions in other people. Because looking in the mirror is uncomfortable. Because thinking about, like, who am I don't get lonely, I don't like to feel that way, or whatever, that we can ignore our own emotions and project it onto others. But how do we recognize it in others? Another hadith. The Prophet Muhammad said, the believer is friendly and befriended. For there is no goodness in one who is neither friendly nor befriended. The best of people are those who are most beneficial to others. Prophet said that we are people who are friendly, and because of that, or they could be mutually exclusive, are befriended by others. How it is that we interact are things that we should see. But the most important is that believers are those that are most beneficial. The best of people are those that are most beneficial to others. The reason why I put this hadith here, because as we're in community and as we're with people, we're trying to recognize loneliness in others, is not for the sake of being like, ha, you're lonely. That doesn't benefit anyone. Nor is it merely to say, well, I recognize it in you, so maybe I have it, for own selfish reasons. The purpose that we would look to find loneliness in other people is so that we can be a benefit to them. So that we can help remove it from them. So that perhaps by removing it from them, actually, we start to remedy some of the loneliness that we have within ourselves. So we have to look. We have to try to have an open heart, an open mind when we're around others, and more specifically, when we're in community. Can we not just make the masjid, you've probably heard this many times, but when we come to the masjid, or more specifically, we come to a part of the masjid that feels like home for us. For many of you, it's probably Qahwa. Can we make sure that we come to Qahwa? The masjid is really big, sometimes hard to think about the masjid. There's like 200 people praying Maghrib, right? But when we come to Qahwa, a place is what, 50 people in here? How do we look for others? Do we see people? Are we just saying salam and coming so that we can benefit from a program, so that we can see our small group of friends? But what about those new faces? What about the friends that we only see at the program that we haven't actually strived or tried to get to know who they are? And so do we have people who are oversharing or withdrawn? People who, and we don't need to psychoanalyze people. Maybe they're just introverted. Maybe they're just extroverted. But is there a change in their behavior? Is something different? We see them all the time, and for some reason, they're wallflowers. They're not trying to interact with anyone. They're not trying to withdraw. Or are they interjecting themselves into every conversation and every place, trying to remind you of stories they had as well, and situations like that? They're oversharing, trying to put themselves in a situation. We have to ask ourselves, again, not in a judgmental way, not in a belittling or looking down upon them, but can we pay attention to that and try to ask ourselves why? Are they performing happiness but privately feeling unseen? This is something that we may not know. And I will tell you that most of us are probably doing. We're performing that we're happy. We're trying to show others, but it's just a thing. You know, subhanAllah, I have my Instagram profile picture. I don't think I changed it. Yeah, my Instagram profile picture is me smiling. I just got finished shaking your brother's hand. And it's outside, immediately when he saw the picture, he said, Abdul Malik's face says, I am so tired, would you leave me alone and let me go? I was like, bro, how did you know? Because that was real, but I have a smile. He said, I can see it in your eyes. There's something about your eyes that tells me you no longer want to smile. You no longer want to be in conversation right now. I was like, yeah, I just shook a brother's hand. He's like, and you no longer want to be there. And so he was able to see, though he wasn't there, just from a picture that I was performing happiness. Yeah, I'm smiling in the picture. I don't even think my mom noticed. But Saad was looking at the picture. We're good friends. He also has hypercritical emotions in general, very close, where he was able to see me in a way that some people couldn't. And that is a reflection of perhaps a power feeling internally, where we don't feel like we're being seen. And that can show up in so many different ways. Whether it be with our families, whether it be at work, people are recognizing the skills that we have. People don't care about our own emotions. People are so consumed with their own selfishness and their own worries and challenges that we are just taken for granted and a part of what's going on. And so what are we doing when we see this? How will we like to be treated by those same people that are making us feel awkward? What is it that we're doing? And how can we make it so that the same thing that we wish we had, others have? Are they excessively busy or distracted? That connects very close to the first one. But are they just constantly moving? Are they constantly moving? Are they constantly distracted? Are they keeping their mind? That's a coping mechanism that I'll admit that I use. I'm always working, always doing something. On to the next thing. When I started my blog, it happened when I didn't feel like, and this is before I joined Amazon, but it happened at a time when I didn't feel like I was intellectually and creatively engaged. I was tired of being critical. I'm noticing deficiencies here and deficiencies there, so I'm demanding, if you want to do something, right? And so I poured into writing. But something I learned this Ramadan was that writing wasn't just an intellectual thing for me. It also was emotional. Reading Quran, fasting Ramadan, praying Tarawih, things that were objectively good, things that I was supposed to be doing, that busied me excessively where I wasn't able to write. And about week 1 through Ramadan, I said, you know what, I just can't write this month. By week 2, I felt like, I can't use the example I was going to use. I felt like someone incredibly thirsty that was drowning, or incredibly thirsty and dying of thirst. I wanted to write so bad, but time wouldn't allow me to do so, which created a sense of despair and a sense of loneliness, simply because the thing that I wanted to do, I was distracted from being able to do it. I couldn't connect with it, which also makes us feel isolated. And this one here is really important. A lack of vulnerability in relationships. Let's be honest, we all know what performing happiness is. We all know what performing, and that, for some of us, is a survival tactic. For some of us, it's a coping mechanism. We have to give the people in our lives just enough to keep them happy so that we can keep moving, and whether it's to ward off their problems or the challenge that come from those relationships or just to keep on moving. But that lack of vulnerability is going to create a lack of connection. It will eventually feel like a disconnect because we don't feel like we have the ability to be our own selves. So we're recognizing that in others. People that are giving, are we looking to connect with people on that level first and foremost? Because perhaps it's us. Perhaps I'm being so superficial with you, and we are so just surface level with each other that you don't even feel like you can be vulnerable with me. That's a problem with me, not a problem with you. And if we are offering that environment where people who care, we share deeply, we connect with people, why are people not choosing to respond in the same way in return? So what are some solutions? And the reason why I'm very intentionally skipping over what does it look like in ourselves, because through the solutions, hopefully it'll be an easier pill to swallow if we have it in ourselves. The first is that we need to engage in muhasabah. Muhasabah is a spiritual term that refers to introspection, where we're reflecting on who we are and what's going on. Why are we feeling lonely? Why are other people not able to share with us as openly? What's the cause of the? Can we whittle things down to figure out, well, it's not that, it's not that. So let's use me as an example. I told you that, alhamdulillah, I have a large family. Alhamdulillah, I work at a masjid around a bunch of people, but there are times that I can feel lonely. Is it my family's fault? No, of course not. Is it your fault? Of course not. Actually, some of you are incredibly warm. Then there has to be something different. How do I figure out then, well, if it's not the community, and I'm always around people, what else is there that I'm not able to figure out? What's causing the loneliness? Why do I feel, with the definition of loneliness, sad and like I don't have people around me? Which ties to the second thing, purpose. If we want to figure out how it is that we can remedy loneliness, a huge problem for that is that we're wandering aimlessly. And this is, I'm not going to philosophize and pontificate about modernity and the problems around modernity. But one of the huge issues is that we just are heedless and we have no clue. We live for the sake of living. Why do we go to college to get a job? Why do we get a job to provide for our families? Why do we provide for our families to be comfortable? Is there a larger, deeper mission that we're trying to achieve, that we want to work for? What are things that we're interested in? How do we go there? What are things that we'd like to accomplish? Not just in a worldly sense, can we take it to a deeper level? And how is it that we're going to earn Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's pleasure through that process? How is it that we're going to use this purpose to be around others, to serve the Ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam? But maybe this is challenging. Maybe it's too esoteric. Either we're too young, we haven't thought about it before. It's just, purpose is difficult. We can skip that, it's okay. We can go straight to suhbah. If you're feeling lonely, and you recognize why it is that you're feeling lonely, we need to be around good people. Not just any people, good people. You know, I was talking to a therapist, not my therapist, but a therapist. I have a therapist, but anyway. We're writing a book together and we were deep in some esoteric, academic, Islamic spirituality stuff. And she was like dropping gem after dropping gem. And she was talking about the power of suhbah, companionship, being around other people. And how she started explaining it was that suhbah is like something wherein our souls reverberate. They bounce off each other. And we connect in this really unseen way. And so I said to her, I'm visual, and I need examples to understand things. So how can I materially understand something that's esoteric, something that's otherworldly, something that's immaterial? And so I said to her, I want you to check my answer. Please forgive me if it's crude. She said, what are you saying? I said, I have a bunch of daughters, and this is something I worry about deeply in the years to come. Can two women or multiple women with around their menstrual cycles align? She said, yeah. I said, do we know how that happens? She said, no. She said, God help you in a few years. My daughters are young. She said, and it's going to be interesting to see who's the dominant out of all of them. I was like, wait, that's possible? She said, yeah. Everyone will beat to the beat of that person's drum. I said, subhanAllah. That's how I feel when I'm with my teachers. I'm around them. And there's no reason or explanation as to why all of a sudden, spiritually, emotionally, I feel together. I'm on the same page. It aligns. And it's not to say that I can discredit others, but they are the dominants in that situation. And because of who they are, I'm able to align with them and what's going on. And so when we think about suhbah, companionship, it's not being around people for the sake of being around people. It's being around people that nourish us. It's being around people that they give to us as much as we're able to give to them. And this is where in modernity, and nowadays we like to think of what will resolve loneliness. If I just get good friends, and we hang out more, I will not feel as lonely. Or if we have friends that are feeling lonely, I just need to smother them with my love, and they will feel less lonely. But that's a problem because it can be incredibly selfish. It can be, as we talked about in the first level, in loneliness as a society, incredibly individualistic. After we have sort of introspected of who we are, we've hopefully tried to find purpose if we are around good, nourishing people, we have to get to work. The Prophet ﷺ said, when he said the hadith in the beginning, the best of the people are those that are of service to others, that are beneficial to others. So don't just think you can be around people. We have to be of service to other people. I can't know what's causing me problems and then have a drive and a mission that I want to achieve, and then know what people are being around and think that I can just sit back and it's going to fix itself. I gotta continue to work, to be introspective, to keep trying to align to my values, and then prioritizing the people that are going to be around me so I can start to fulfill those goals. I have to keep striving and struggling against and with myself. And the point of this is, brothers and sisters, it's not going to be something that is stagnant. So if I think about myself, I was going to tell this story at the beginning, I'll tell it now. When I first went to Qura, to Mecca to study, I hadn't even turned 18. It was the first time that I'd been away from my mother. I'm a mama's boy. The first time, God bless my mother, long preserve her and elevate her range. It was the first time I've been away from my mom more than a weekend. And I'm now alone in the blessed city of Mecca. I haven't gotten their version of a green card yet. It's been a month since I've seen anyone that I know. I don't really have money. And now I've got what I later find out is bronchitis. Got a horrible cough. I can't eat. I'm losing weight. I'll never forget. On the corner of Azia Shamalia, in the area of Azia, next to the university, there used to be a restaurant there. Called my mom and said, "Mom, I love you. This may be the last time we talk." So I'm like, "What are you talking about?" I said, I don't know if I'm gonna make it. And she said, "What is wrong?" I said, "I got this cough, I'm losing weight, I haven't eaten in a few hours. It's been rough." She said, "Abdul go to the hospital." I said, "I don't speak Arabic, Mom. I love you. I don't know what I'm gonna do." She said, "Get in a taxi and say hospital." "Do you know hospital in Arabic?" I said, "I think so." She said, "Well, say that, they'll take you there." I said, "I don't have any money." "Just go to the ATM, you have my credit card." I said, "Okay." I was incredibly lonely. And because I was lonely, I was sick. But it made the world feel like it was literally coming to an end. And I tend to be a little melodramatic. But it was something I really felt at the time. But it was a phone call, 7,000 plus miles away, to someone who genuinely cared about me, that was able to provide that suhbah and push me to take action. Went to the mustashfa, went to the hospital, got some antibiotics, felt better a little bit. The point is, we need to be working. We need to do things. Lastly, as we're closing out, how do we be alone with Allah? Loneliness is a part of the human condition. There is no consistency in much of anything in life, particularly our emotions. We're going to have peaks and we're going to have valleys. We're going to have times when we're incredibly elated, and there are going to be times when we feel absolutely broken. But the reality is, what we have to do is try to orient our hearts and our minds and stay with it. What was the hadith that we first started off with? Is the believers in their affection and their mercy with each other are like one body. And what was the hadith we mentioned? The other one, the second hadith that we mentioned, that the best of people are those that are of service to others. The point in all of this is not focusing on this dunya, it's focusing on akhirah. And that's not to say that we need to be morbid. That's not to say that we shouldn't strive to work to improve who we are. Prophet Muhammad, Aisha, she said the Prophet Muhammad never chose between two things except that he chose the easier of the two. Prophet never, he said the believer is never stung by the same hole twice. As Muslims, we are supposed to strive to work. We're supposed to strive to improve our circumstance, to improve our situation. So I'm not saying when we say be alone with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that I need to just throw up and say, throw up my hands and say, woe is me, that's it, khalas. But what I am saying is that in reality, all of us are muftaqir ila Allah. That all of us are in a deep, impoverished poverty with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if we can be mindful of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then it doesn't matter if we're with a bunch of people or by ourselves. We can be alone with Allah. When the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ is going through in Ghar Hira, as we mentioned earlier, he's with Abu Bakr, and they're in the cave. And Abu Bakr says, what happens if they look down? The Prophet ﷺ says, فَمَا بَالُ اثْنَيْنِ إِلَّا وَاللَّهُ ثَالِثُهُمَا. What about two people and Allah is the third? When we find incredible, just difficult things happen in the seerah, whether it be of the Prophet ﷺ or of his companions. I'm thinking of Ammar ibn Yasir, and his parents were murdered in one of the most horrible ways possible, right in front of him. And then he changes how he thinks or what he says, not what he thinks, what he says. And he goes to Prophet Muhammad and says, I'm disbelieved. Does the Prophet Muhammad say, well, that's it, see you later, brother? No, the Prophet speaks to him kindly. The Prophet tells him, do you believe in the thing that you said? He said, no. He said, you still believe. And he says, your mother is the first person, the first of the shuhada in Jannah. He immediately orients to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so when we're going through difficulties, or we're seeing difficulties happening in the world, can we think about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? When we see the mothers, like, subhanAllah, Gaza for me has been like a workshop, a clinic on human potential in Islamic spirituality. For me personally, seeing, well, I remember I saw something AJ Plus highlighted with all the aunties, or a lot of the videos that were covered the aunties in Gaza were wearing what looked like just an abaya, but actually was the prayer garment. And I was like, yo, my mom, my wife, the women in my life wear those in the house. And that's what the video was saying. They're wearing it because that's all they had with them. They just threw it on left. So thinking, subhanAllah, despite literally sweeping up their house and there's no window, and they're happy. They're able to say, Hasbunallah. That level, like, I'm not trying to be morbid. I'm not trying to say we need to think in the most catastrophic ways possible. But when we're able to see human beings, Muslims, believers, connect with Allah in a way in which they're able to find strength. When you hear about the stories coming out of Sudan, you know, Imagine tells me, like, women are asking, can we commit suicide because we don't want atrocities happening? Like, that level of emotion that you would ask for a fatwa. I'm so lonely, so scared. Is this permissible for me? And yet they're still protesting, they're still coming together as family, they're still trying to figure it out. When I talk to the young men and women who barely got out of both Gaza and Sudan, I've been honored to speak to these people. Like the level of strength they have. And that's not because of they are superhuman, like they have super muscles, or like, no, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is just so central, and their lived experience has been one that has enabled them to think about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in a very experiential way. It gives them a strength that we can hardly even imagine. So how do we then stay alone with Allah? We have to try to find Allah in everything. The line of poetry has to be that one of my teachers always mentions, وَفِي كُلِّ شَيْءٍ آيَةٍ تَدُلُّ عَلَى أَنَّهُ وَاحِدٌ. And every single thing is a sign that proves Allah is one. How do we find Allah in our experiences? That means shifting the prism of our minds. Can we look through the lenses of La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah? Basic theology that we know. Allah is the creator of the heavens and the earth. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants ease for me. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala won't burden me more than I can bear. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the creator of all things. If I know that about Allah, and I feel like absolute garbage right now, but Allah put me in this situation, then I have to believe that there's a silver lining, there's something for me in it. And if we're able to force a processing in an emotional and spiritual level, not to say that we stop or give up again on taking the worldly needs, but if we can force ourselves to think about Allah in that light, how would 18-year-old Abdul Malik bin in Mecca thinking calling Imam Zunda? I will tell you, I don't think I've ever shared this before. Not that Adam did this. Oh, I did it a few years ago. Doesn't matter. The verse, my favorite verse in the Quran is وَمَن يَتَقِ اللَّهَ يَجْعَلْ مَخْرَجًا. And those who are mindful of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and those who are mindful of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah will make a way out. It's my favorite verse in the Quran. Now, why it's my favorite verse in the Quran is because I found myself as a student of knowledge in Mecca. So I'm living in the most sacred place of earth. And actually, one of the reasons why this picture is so, it's my background picture. But one of the reasons why it's so special to me is not just because I took that picture, not because I lived there or drove through this area every single day going to school. Because this is like one highway but another highway over, so I'm seeing this. I thought to myself, just crash the car. It's too much. Just crash. You're in Mecca. And I caught myself. How is it that you're doing the best thing on the face of the earth, studying the deen? Literally in Mina. This is where in a few months people are going to stay during Hajj, a sacred place. How is it you be the best place of the earth, doing one of the best things that a human could possibly do, and you have suicidal thoughts? How is that possible? And I was blessed. Perhaps it's due to my mother's upbringing, due to being studying, something happened. I remember this verse. وَمَن يَتَقِ اللَّهَ يَجْعَلْ مَخْرَجًا. And those who are mindful of Allah, He'll make way out for them. Pulled the car over, cried, got myself together, and drove home. That isn't where it stopped. I had to figure out why that thought came to me. It's because I was lonely. By myself. Because I was remarried, once divorced, failed marriage, remarried, my wife was mad at me about something, I couldn't figure it out, thought she was going to leave me. I felt lonely, I felt like a failure. And the pressure of that led me to having dangerous thoughts. But I had to act. I had a new purpose now. Allah said, if I'm mindful of Him, He'll make a way out for me. So from that, I said, okay, I got to figure out what I'm doing wrong. I got to figure out how to make my wife happy. I got to figure out how to be the type of man that I think that I want to be. But it has to be through a lens of Allah. And that's where the journey started. That's why I do the work that I do. That's why I care about people. Because I was in Mecca, and I had horrible thoughts. And for being very honest, it wasn't the first time. I mean, it wasn't the last time at all. But if we can remember Allah, and we have some sort of things that ground us in what it is that we believe in about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, no matter how difficult our situation is, how lonely we may feel, and no matter how dangerous our thoughts may be, if we can remember Allah, perhaps we'll save our lives. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make things easy for all of us. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to remove the loneliness from our hearts and replace it with the contentment in Him. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to remove any difficulties and hardships we may feel and replace it with happiness and joy, ease and goodness and well-being. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us to be people who truly believe in Him, that are able to be humble enough to introspect, to be vulnerable enough to find a purpose that's uniquely oriented for each and every one of us. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to put good friends about us and to give us the energy, to give us the zeal, to give us the forbearance to act, even when it feels like there's no hope. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala alihi. There is 15 minutes till Isha, and so I'm open for questions, comments, Yes, I do.
So how do you know when to seek like professional help from a therapist rather than like going to a mom or like someone else?
So good question. How do you know when to go to a therapist or talk to Imam or whatever? Ideally, the person, whoever you talk to, Imam, auntie, community member, they know who they are. So I have quite a few people that come to me on the regular, and I'm like, listen, I don't know how to help you, but if you want to keep coming, ask me something. Your situation, I don't have the expertise in, but we can keep talking. And every single time, I'm like, listen, I have no clue, but I'm here with you. I have enough self-understanding to know where my limits are, what my training is in. When things are beyond that, I have to make that known every single time. So ideally, whoever you talk to, that is a place they have. And ideally, they have not only expertise, but experience in whatever it is that you're going to. And then we know why it is that we're going to wherever we're going to. I know me. I'm incredibly introspective. I'm incredibly action-oriented. So when I talked to my therapist, I tried it. We did like 3 months of just like talking. And I was like, bro, I got friends. I only talk to friends. That ain't working for me. We gotta find something else because I'm trying not to quit on you, brother. And he was like, okay, let's figure it out. I was like, I'm gonna tell you what happened. I'm gonna tell you what I feel and I think the result. You tell me how crazy I am. He said, okay. And we did it a couple times. And I was like, this works. We can do this. So that's what happens. I'll either journal, I'll take notes, I will tell him, I had this happen, this what I thought was the process. He was like, nope, you ain't do that there. I was like, come on, brother. He's like, nope, you still got to do that. All right, cool. And it's like having an unbiased support system for me. It has training in these different things. It can see some flaws in my life. That's what works for me. I know other people, it becomes a paid friend, and that's really what they need. God bless. I think what's important is to know what you need. Does the person have the expertise for that? So like if you have a drug, if you are addicted to drugs, don't go talk to me. I can't help you with that. I will continue, but talk to an addiction specialist, right? Etc. Yeah.
So I heard you and I talked about like righteous something, right? But it is a little bit like Trinity, where we're told to seek righteous something that tries to tell you what it means to be the righteous something, to be a good friend. So is there any like moment to feel like how to be a good friend?
How can you be a good friend? Good question. I think the reason why we don't have people talking or describing what it means to be a good friend is because really it's just how to be a good person. You're loyal. You're honest. You're vulnerable. You're humble. You're consistent. You're trustworthy. Like very basic maxims. But then after that, the reason why it's defined righteous or because you can find anyone that has that, but you may just not click. And so you need to find someone who's just like a good person, but also has either shared purpose or shared understanding. And that may be that they're your twin, that may mean they can be polar opposites. I've shared this publicly many times. Sheikh Farhan and I are polar opposites. He has always leaned right, I've always leaned left, since we first met. He's very straight to the point, a little blunt. I'm super soft, super nice. He's a nice guy too, just and so, but we have shared values and commitment and loyalty to each other that has allowed us to be friends for almost 20 years now. And so and then as we've grown as friends, as we've gotten older, we've had children, all of these things, the relationship will change. The importance, how much time, how much we need, the type of what we have, it'll change, but it doesn't mean that how we feel about each other change. 8:05. 8, I'm thinking about your shot, I'm tripping. Let's go pray and come back, inshallah. We got time, bro.
My bad.
No, thank you.
Appreciate you. Yeah.
Sorry, the class will be continue?
Huh?
Will be continue after prayer?
Yeah, it's continue after prayer.